One of the things I've really loved about my practice of Raja Yoga is that it encourages everyone to have their own link with God, that each one enjoys their own living relationship with God. And it's not that we really worship those who have a relationship with God, like the saints, the sages, and the prophets. But we really have our own relationship with God. But we have immense respect and love for those on the spiritual journey and those who become examples for us. And one such example for me was Dadi Janki. I met her in London when I was just 22 years old. And she was giving a talk at the Spiritualist Association of Great Britain, which is in Hyde Park Corner. I'd been travelling the world on a search really for truth, I suppose you could say. And I'd lived with all religious communities from, Southeast Asia, India, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. And as soon as I saw Dadi Janki, I saw that she had experienced something. She had something. There was a feeling, and I'm sure you know what I mean, that as soon as you meet certain people, you get an incredible feeling from them. And over the years, I heard so much from Dadi Janki, and she was such a positive influence on me to grow spiritually. She never taught me to worship her in any way, but to have my own connection with God. And I remember one thing that she said that has always remained so deeply with me. The ultimate result of all knowledge is to be completely loving. And I love that. That ultimately I absorb truth into the core of my being. How does truth emerge? It emerges as love. And I think there's no more beautiful life, and that was really her life, an incredible life, where she fell so deeply in love with God, and because of that she had deep love for herself, and deep love for everyone who came in front of her, whoever they may be, and from whatever background. And, I can remember that often she would say that to love God is at the heart of life. And for me, I think that what I observed in her was that she had this intense love for God. And because of that, she had this natural love. She would naturally remember God. And when your mind is naturally remembering God, it's in a beautiful space. It's not remembering the past, the worries, the problems, the issues. And when you naturally remember, you naturally change. When your mind's sort of really in that elevated space, you step back into your true self-respect. And when you naturally change or transform, you actually naturally serve and give to others. Just your presence, your face, your vibrations, your attitude is giving to others, is uplifting the atmosphere. But what was the seed of all of that? It's to absolutely fall in love with God. And that's probably what I learned most from Dadi Janki, how to love God. And that if you really have the courage to love God totally and completely, it can take you beyond absolutely every challenge, problem, difficulty, and obstacle in life. And I have a memory with her. I was in a group from an international group representing the regions of the world. And she would meet with us 2 or 3 times a year for days at a time. And I remember once we were meeting with her and we were all chatting about something, and then she stopped. And she just stopped speaking, and she looked at each one of us through her eyes with such loving drishti, or loving vision, deeply loving. It was like her eyes were little light bulbs of love, radiating love. And it went on for minutes. This whole atmosphere turned into this incredible feeling of divine love. And then she said, "It's love that takes me beyond all problems. It's love that makes me tireless. It's love that's helped me grow to where I am." And she said, "Learn how to absorb true love from God." And I really feel that that was like at the heart of her life. And because of that love for God, she learned to love herself. And I've experienced, this is the biggest challenge for most of us, that I think we do love God, we want to love God, but because of a lack of love for the self, we often feel distant from God because we don't feel worthy or good enough. And I have a memory in my early days in London. In one class she came in and like a little child and she said, "What do you love most?" to the class. And all of us gave numerous answers and she said, "No, no, 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 no." And we said, "What's the answer, Daddy? What do you love most?" She said, "Me." And, perhaps some of us say, "Oh, that's full of arrogance." But it was sort of a pure feeling that when I really learn to love God, God sees my value and I step back into my value, my self-respect. I would say the greatest gift of loving God is the gift of self-value, that you really step back into such a self-value that nothing or no one can influence your relationship with God and your relationship with yourself. And I think that's an incredible gift, because I remember Dadi Janki telling us that when she was a little girl, a dog would bark and she would jump. She said, "I was such a frightened little thing." And really, when I knew her, I can honestly say she was fearless. She was completely fearless. And it was her love for God that took her to that place. And because of that love for God and because of developing that self-respect, that self-respect, to the extent she had self-respect, she could respect everyone. To the extent she had self-respect, she was humble. To the extent she had self-respect, she was loving and she was loved by all. Because that love for God emerged, that sense of self-value in herself. And this really helped me a lot, because I knew where she started from and how she had this long spiritual journey to really step back into her self-value. And then because of that platform of having a deep loving relationship with God and a deep loving relationship with the true self, the soul, she loved everybody. And that is such a beautiful life, that when you just become, an instrument to give love to all. And I remember once someone asking her, "Dadi, how can you really love everyone?" And what she said was, "I see their intent." She said, if you look at their behavior, if you look at their strengths, their weaknesses, it's hard. But when you see that most people have the intent to be good, the intent to do well, we have a high intent, but often we come under the influence of our nature. And also because when you fall in love with God, you become naturally detached. It's like you become so lost in God's love, you're pulled away from influence. So if people behave well or they don't behave well, you can keep giving them love. And I learned from her also how to learn the specialty of every person. And this was one of the things that she loved to think deeply. She was always, as we would say in the Brahma Kumaris, churning knowledge, going deep. And a lot of it, she would see a virtue in someone. She'd see a specialty and she'd say, why, how did they get this specialty? Or what is the reason? And she'd go deep into learning. And she once told us in the early days when the Brahma Kumaris began, and it was in the mid-1930s in Pakistan, before partition, a community of about 300 lived together. You could imagine for 14 years they all lived together. How well would you get to know everyone? All of us know when we live under the roof with our family, how well do we know each other? We know each other, every strength, every weakness, everything. And she said that whenever her mind would wander onto a person's weakness, she would keep a little book and write down 10 strengths about that person, 10 positive qualities. Because you know how sometimes the mind gets distorted and someone is a really sweet person, but you just see the weakness and that is amplified in your mind and that's all you can see and you think it's reality. But actually, that's my shortcoming. And really, my own experience is that when you fall in love with God and step back in your self-respect, to move to the highest place on the spiritual journey, it's essential to see the good in everybody. It's easy for 80%, but for that 20% where we're challenged, we need to make effort. And Dadi Janki had amazing attention to looking beyond the weakness, knowing so deeply and giving so much love and encouragement to everyone that came in front of her. And my experience of my relationship with her was that the whole time I knew her, 45 years, her vision on me was so elevated. When I was in front of her, I could see her vision was seeing my value. I knew my weakness, but she chose to see my value. She knew my weakness too, but her focus was towards my value, and that it uplifted me incredibly. So Dadi Janki had such an extraordinarily positive influence on my life.